Offer us, to start, a viewer's guide to the evidence the committee expects to present this evening.
Well, you have to tune in and see, of course.
Thank you for that. We want that too.
But, we'll, as has been mentioned by other members, we're going to sort through what happened sort of minute by minute on the day of the riot. What was the president doing? What was happening at the same time that he was doing various things, or more to the point, choosing not to do some things? Who was urging him to do what, and what was his response? And I think it will. There's new evidence. I wouldn't overplay the outtake issue. There are some outtakes, but it's the accumulation of evidence and information that I think will lead people to a conclusion that I have sadly reached, which is this mob attack on the Capitol was intended by the president. He summoned the mob, and he knew they were armed, and he asked them to go to the Capitol, and he refused to call them off. Why? Because he wanted to overturn the election. That's really the bottom line.
He wanted to obstruct the official proceeding. It's a statute your colleague, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, read from either at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. And I wonder how important it is. I know you've been more cautious than even some of the other members of the Select Committee to always articulate the difference between your mission and DOJ's. But it is undeniable that you have presented evidence clearly to illustrate the acts that Trump committed and did not commit in the case of what he did during the insurrection, and his intent, his deep knowledge that he had lost the election, his deep knowledge from multiple aides and advisors that the Eastman plot was illegal, and now his deep knowledge of the violence and the weapons that his supporters were carrying, and his commitment to being there anyway. Where should we look for tonight's evidence to build? Is it in the acts or the lack of action, or is it in the sort of vein of his intent?
Well, I think people are going to have to reach their own conclusions, as I have, but it's an accumulation of evidence of what he was being told, what he knew, what others were saying, and the like. I think that you can reach a judgment that, we're not a charging body, we're a legislative committee. And so you can reach a conclusion about what happened. That's a different matter than the Department of Justice faces. They have to come up with a case that they believe they can win in court, and that's their job, not my job. But I'll say this as well. More evidence is coming in. This is an investigation that is very much ongoing, and we're going to be working through the summer to track down some of this new information.
Will that include additional hearings next month?
Well, I'm not in a position to announce that. That's always done by the chair and vice chair. But as I think it's been acknowledged publicly, we will have at least an interim report this fall. And I would be very surprised if there wasn't a public presentation, at least, of that report. And there may be other public events. But, there's been a lot of evidence, that we're constrained in a hearing format. There's only so many hours you have. There's a lot of evidence that I think is actually quite telling that we haven't been able to include in our hearings. So we may be releasing some of the that evidence throughout the summer as well, that we just couldn't fit into the time frame of various hearings, not only this one, but some of the previous hearings that I think are important.
One of the things that has come out in the last 48 and 24 hours is the very obvious fact that the Secret Service deleted text messages, and that they've known for a long time that text messages on and around January 5th and 6th were deleted. I worked in the White House on September 11th, obviously a very different attack, a horrific tragedy. But in terms of the Secret Service's duty to protect the protectees, the president and the vice president of the United States and their families, I can't fathom anyone deleting any of their communications from that day from the agency in charge of protecting their lives. What is the path forward for finding out what was on those devices?
Well, we're going to dig in as best we can to find out. There's a lot of concerning elements to this. First, on January 16th, the chairs of 4 of the committees of jurisdiction, this was before the January 6th committee, wrote to the Department of Homeland Security and ordered them to retain all the records. 11 days later, the Secret Service went ahead and engaged in a tech update that involved erasing that very same evidence. So that's a tremendous concern. Honestly, I'm concerned that the Inspector General has sat on this information for a considerable period of time. We just learned about it last Thursday. It's been a week. He's known about it for months and months and months. Why didn't he tell us before now? Why did we learn only now from the Secret Service and the Inspector General about this? We're going to try and find out as much as we can. It's not just the text messages, obviously, that we're interested in, but all of the communications in that the Secret Service has, and we're going to review all of the radio channels, look at all of the emails, all of the other documents, and we hope, we only got one text message, and it was, it could have been captured, frankly, through the person it was sent from in a different agency that did not erase their records. So it's a concern.
What is the sort of sense of what the motives are? I mean, I wouldn't have said this before 7 public hearings have been put on by the Select Committee, but it's clear that at least 2 of the hearings have featured sworn testimony around a movement, a presidential movement. With the Cassidy Hutchinson hearing, the committee took pains to explain something very opaque to normal people, that a president moves in 2 different ways. One is an OTR where nobody knows, not even the whole staff, but the Secret Service does and the principal does. And the other is a planned movement. Cassidy testified to how Donald Trump's desire to visit the Capitol was an OTR. Yet rioters knew he was coming, which is a complete breach of every security protocol that I'm aware of from working in the White House for 6 years. The other testimony that involves the Secret Service is this altercation in the vehicle. It wasn't the Beast, it was an SUV. I mean, the Secret Service seems so central. Do you anticipate subpoenaing some of the agents or having public testimony featuring their testimony? I mean, do you want to talk to them again?
We do want to talk to them. They have retained private counsel, which is unusual, but they have a right to do that. There will be more information in the hearing this evening on the effort of the president to move to the Capitol. But one of the testimony earlier was that this was not a last-minute decision. I mean, Rudy Giuliani told Ms. Hutchinson on January 2nd that they were going to walk to the Capitol. This was not a last-minute deal, and it was not a casual deal. The president was obviously very serious in wanting to do it. So I would urge, watch the hearing tonight. You'll learn a little bit more about that.
You know that I'll be watching. I mean, it also is the part of the public hearings that ensnares Republican leader McCarthy. Cassidy Hutchinson testified to being on the phone with him while Donald Trump was giving that speech on the ellipse, saying, "You told me he wouldn't come." Are you still interested in obtaining testimony from the Republican members that you've invited to spend time with, or they haven't been subpoenaed, but they've been invited to chat with the committee?
Absolutely. We'd very much like to hear from them. And I honestly don't understand why they don't come in. You know, when you look at the statements that Leader McCarthy made on the 6th, he blamed then President Trump, and he was right to do so. He had conversations that day we'd like to hear about. I just don't understand why it wouldn't want to come in and help the American public understand the full picture.
Let me ask you something about the Secret Service. Have they newly retained private counsel, or have all of their interactions with the Select Committee been through private counsel?
I think this is new.
Since the evidence has been presented to the public?
I can't give you the exact date, but I believe this is new. So,
Wow. That's always an interesting development, whether it leads to anything or not. That is always an interesting tell. Congresswoman, my last question for you is, if nothing happens in the sort of legal arena, if there is no accountability for Donald Trump or his inner circle, will the mission and the performance and presentation of the committee have still been of vital importance?
Well, I think what we're doing is important. The assignment the committee got was to find out all the information that we could about what happened on the 6th and the days leading up to that. And I think we've made tremendous headway in uncovering the plot and the elements of the plot. The second assignment we had was to recommend changes in legislation or practices that would make us safer in the future. And as Liz Cheney and I have been working on a reform to the Electoral Count Act. We are not quite ready to roll it out, but we're close. We have actually reached out to a broad array of academics and retired judges and the like, super conservative and not, to get a broad input. And I think we've got something that really does would make us safer. Obviously, as Dr. Eastman admitted, his plan violated the Electoral Count Act, but that doesn't mean that you don't want to make it less easy for people to violate it. So that's something we're looking at. We may make other recommendations of changes in law. We've always known that we're not prosecutors. The information we have may help or not the Department of Justice. As I say, they have a different obligation, but I think most of us have reached the conclusion that the president has tremendous culpability for what happened on the 6th.